when we don't know what to do, more often than not, we just do way too much. Grieving people do not need comparison. They need compassion. Joe Biden has been sharply criticized for his response to the Maui wildfires. From sitting on a Delaware beach, then onto a Lake Tahoe vacation, the tardiness of the president has been widely noted. After finally arriving on the island, President Biden took the stage at a local event and compared the utter devastation of an entire community with a small kitchen fire he once suffered. Let's go to the tape.
I don't want to compare difficulties, but we have a little.
Then don't, right? I don't want to compare here. You know, no need for comparison. I don't want to do this. You do want to do it because you're gonna do it.
Wow. Sense, Jill and I, what it's like to lose a home. Years ago, now 15 years ago, I was in Washington doing Meet the Press. It was a sunny Sunday, and lightning struck at home on a little lake. It's outside of our home, not a lake, a big pond, and hit a wire and came up underneath our home into the heating ducts, the air conditioning duct. To make a long story short, I almost lost my wife, my 67 Corvette, and my cat.
Okay. This is so bad. It's so cringy. It's so out of touch. I almost lost my 67 Corvette. Now, I know that most of you here who live on the island are relatively middle to lower class, middle to lower income, and you could never own a 67 Corvette. But don't worry, my 67 Corvette is fine. Now, this will be shocking to you because politicians, they are as pure as the driven snow. When they say something, you can take it to the bank. They never, ever, ever falsify. So this is going to shock you. But the story he's telling is grossly exaggerated. This happened in 2004, right? We can just you were a sitting senator. We can just look at the news reports. It was reported as a small kitchen fire. It was caused by lightning. That was true. A small kitchen fire that produced smoke that the fire department says they put out relatively quickly. They did say it could have been bad, but they got there very quick and it didn't spread past the kitchen. And you don't know what it's like to lose a home because you have more homes and it was just your kitchen. You know what it's like to have to remodel a kitchen. I'm sure that's very frustrating. I'm sure your favorite pots and pans were in there, but you don't know what it's like to lose a home. And even if you did lose your home, you got other homes, right? So often, people walk into situations where others are grieving and they just don't know what to do. And so I'm being harsh, and I'm probably not done with that. I expect a lot out of my leaders, being a little bit harsh. But I do want to be fair as well, that this isn't just something that Joe Biden uniquely struggles with. When we walk in and people are deeply grieving, and this is something that I have to do a lot as a pastor. I show up in some of the worst moments in people's lives. I officiate a lot of funerals. And I've had to learn how to navigate grieving people. And this is something we will all have to do. You will have friends and family members and coworkers who go through extreme suffering because there is real suffering in this world. And when we don't know what to do, more often than not, we just do way too much. Grieving people do not need comparison. They need compassion. He started off by saying, I don't want to compare, but then went on for 3 minutes to compare something that's literally a nothing to probably by the end of this, hundreds of people who are dead, hundreds more who are missing, total loss of property. This isn't like my cat's eyebrows got singed and it got close to my Corvette. This is like the loss of an entire community. Like, hey, I know your entire family was just murdered in front of you. Have I ever told you about the hangnail I got 17 years ago? It was really, really bad. We know that you don't do this. People do not need comparison. They need compassion. And there is a time and a place for building equity and empathy with people if you have actually gone through what they've gone through. If someone loses their mother and you have lost your mother and they know you've lost your mother, then you have a unique opportunity. And this is part of how God redeems even the worst parts of our story, even the most painful parts of our history. God redeems that because it builds equity and empathy with people who you can uniquely speak to. I mean, heaven forbid, but people who have lost children, they have an ability to stand with other people who lose children in a way that most people just can't. But even when you have a direct connection and direct correlation, what they need up front is still not your comparison. That isn't how you lead. What they need is compassion. The Greek word for compassion, it's a compound word that comes from the idea of eating the insides of an animal. So like eating, like literally eating you from the inside out. That's what compassion does. It just stirs us in such an extreme way. Romans 12 says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Proverbs 18:13 says, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and his shame. One of the more interesting books of the Old Testament is the book of Job. Most people are convinced this isn't a historical story, that it is ancient Greek poetry. And Job goes through almost immeasurable suffering. He loses his wife. He loses all of his kids. He loses all of his resources, everything, his homes, everything. And what's interesting is at the very beginning of the story, some of Job's friends come over, and the first thing they do is write. They really nail this. It says, when Job's 3 friends heard about all this adversity that happened to him, each of them came from his home. They met together to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. Then they sat on the ground with him 7 days and nights, but no one spoke a word to him because they saw that his suffering was very intense. They were just there. They were just present. And sometimes the greatest present you can give someone is your presence, is just being with them. You're not going to have the magic words. When someone is really suffering, when a community has lost all of their homes and all of their vehicles and all of their lands and many loved ones and don't know if they're getting their property back, you don't have the right words to say. You cannot take that pain away from them. You can't crack the right joke that's going to make them, forget their troubles. And you certainly can't draw a comparison to something that has nothing to do with that. This is a pattern that we're seeing in President Biden's leadership. When Gold Star families are interacting with the president, they're reporting. This has happened multiple times, and he's actually done it in public press conferences as well, where it's like, I know what you're going through because I also lost a kid in battle. And twofold, just like he didn't almost lose a house, he had a kitchen fire, he did not lose a son in battle. His son was a veteran, and then later died from cancer. 2 very different things. And when you tell someone whose son was just killed in Iraq, Jill and I know exactly how you feel. We brought our son home in a flagged drape coffin as well, which is number 1, just lying. And number 2, they don't need your comparison. They just need your compassion. They just need to hear that you are so sorry for what they're going through. They just need to know that you'll do whatever they need you to do, that they get to set the pace. You're not trying to squeeze something out of them. When you go into a grieving person with comparison, the number 1 thing it is immensely selfish. It's like, I have a part of this too. I'm in this with you guys too. And you're just not. Even if you have lost in the exact same way they have lost, months before or years before, you're not sitting where they are on their journey of grief. People need compassion. They don't just need comparison. There is time for the next steps, that there is time to walk alongside of them. There is time to lift their spirits, but it's not in the earliest moments of grieving. And we should remember that, because all of us will deal with very, very real grief. All of us will need to stand by people in our lives. And if you can learn from this and learn how to just be present and to lead with compassion, you don't need the answers. You need to be present. You need to be open to what they need. You need to be responsive to how they act and what they ask for, but do not lead with comparison. I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Clayton Tyner podcast. If you want to watch the full podcast, you can check that out somewhere right around here. And if you want to subscribe, you can do that right over here somewhere. Also, you can follow me at Clayton Tyner. That's Tyner on Twitter and Instagram. I would love for you to subscribe to the channel so you can keep up with everything that we're doing.